Hello and welcome to the Collective Conspiracy Show. Joined by Andrew again, regular guest, almost co-host these days, to be honest. And I think we're going to be joined by the frogs. So regular viewers of the show know I keep some poison dart frogs, and they like to show up every now and then and be very vocal. Thank you for joining, everybody. Again, whether you're watching live or whether you're watching at a later date. It's been a few weeks since we had our last show, holiday season. I haven't been very well. Andrew's had his own reasons. So, but we're here now anyway, and we're doing the long-awaited Paul McCartney show. So, is Paul McCartney dead or not? It's quite light-hearted, but in actually some elements, Andrew, are quite dark, aren't they? When you look at some of the elements of this, they come across as quite sinister.
Absolutely, Kieran, yes. And it's one of those, it's a bit like some people react to the moon landing hoax, they go, no, it's crazy, it's nonsense, and it can't be true. And why are you even talking about it? Because, and particularly with this one, the people have said to me, oh, you shouldn't have that on your website because it discredits the other research. And I can understand, I'm sympathetic to that point of view. And when I first started to study it in more detail, I just thought it was kind of just one of those things, a bit like the Loch Ness Monster.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm still, the Loch Ness Monster, again, I'm very much, I think that I don't know what that is, but there's certainly been its share of, that famous picture, I know I've digressed a little bit, but I'm just trying to put it in a sort of context of some kind. That with the Loch Ness Monster, that famous picture with the neck coming out of the water that was taken in the 30s, I think. And that was, I think, only relatively recently, that was revealed to be a hoax. Within, I think, in like year 2003 or something, I forget. You could probably find that out easily. And but this again is one of those things. Apparently, it started with a news story, and it started in 1966, and on 67. Sometime in the before 1970, certainly there was some newspaper article about Paul McCartney having been killed.
I think it might have been before 66. Let me just check.
I forget the exact date.
I'm sure some of the clues that I've been looking into.
I'm just going to
you
carry on talking, because I'm going to have to dive off for a minute. My wife's calling me, so
that's absolutely fine.
I'll dive off.
Yep, sure. Andrew, as always, is absolutely spot on. Supposedly he died on the 9th of November in 1966. Now, for those watching, firstly, are you a fan of the Beatles? Because I'm not really. I think they're very overrated. Maybe ahead of their time for when they were around, but I not for me. That then a couple of the songs are okay, but yeah. But as Andrew's saying that, people will look into this and they get discredited because it's not the kind of topic. It doesn't hold as much weight as something like a 9/11 or UFO cover-ups or things like that. It doesn't hold as much weight as that because it doesn't directly affect people's lives. Or the moon landings, for example, that so many people were invested in. The thing is with this is I always look at evidence, and if evidence seems to show me point me in a certain direction, and I'll go that way, whether it is something as silly or as menial as a famous person supposedly dying and being replaced by a lookalike. If you think that discredits some of the work that Andrew does and some of the work that other researchers do, then I think that's a bit unfair and a bit unjust, because that the evidence is there to see, and you have to go through this, you have to do your research, you have to dig through a lot of stuff, which Andrew will come to at some point in the show. The depth that some people have done with this research is incredible. And when the evidence is there for people to see, I don't think it can be discredited, and I don't think it should be rubbished as something that is not that important, or it's just a bit silly, because it's not. And it's the same with the Loch Ness Monster, really, as Andrew was saying. If things like that are real, then it's mind-blowing, and again, is there evidence for the Loch Ness Monster? Maybe. The people that believe they've seen it certainly believe they've seen something. And it's the same here with the Paul McCartney thing. So he supposedly died. I'm sure Andrew will cover this in a bit more detail, but he supposedly died on the 9th of November in 1966 in a car crash. And the Beatles then replaced him very quickly. Now, why? That's a big question we'll talk about in the show. Why would the Beatles replace him? Andrew, I was just saying there that he died on the 9th of November in '66, supposedly in a car crash, and the biggest question on a lot of people's minds is, well, if he died, he died. That's the end of the Beatles. Why did they feel the need to replace him? And I think just they're such a big entity at the time. They were such a big money making machine that they had to keep going. And
I think that what you've brought up there, Kieran, is a key point. Of course, that always happens. People immediately say, well, why would they bring out a replacement? So they go to motive and they don't look at the evidence. So, and it's the same with a lot of the things we talk about. People have got to know the motive before they can feel they can explore what actually happened. And I suppose in this case, a lot of people have heard like, oh yeah, there's all these messages encoded in Sergeant Pepper's, and if you look at the cover, I think one of the key ones that people have heard of, I think this is one that I'd heard of, is if you look at the cover of Sergeant Pepper, I think it's the wax dummies of the Beatles. Somebody's got their hand raised, I think, behind Paul's head. Or over Paul's head, and that's meant to be some Tibetan sign of death or something. I can't remember the exact thing. I might have got that wrong. And that's the one I'd heard. And then the other one is that if you get the Sergeant Pepper's drum thing and you mirror image it, it says something like Paul die or something.
No, you can get here, but it's Hear. And then if you mirror something else, it says lies. There's a reef that says the Beatles, and beneath it is half letters. And if you mirror it, it says Paul. So it's Here lies Paul.
Yeah. And you get all these things, and you think, yeah, that's just like, and that was where I was at with it. I thought, well, I can't say it's not true, but the evidence that's there, it doesn't really amount to much. But then I can't remember how I came across it. Just the research. This was back in 2012, and I came across this blog by Tina Foster. And I quite liked the name of it because it was plasticmacker.blogspot.com. So I thought I quite like things like that sort of And the lady that's done this, she's actually an attorney, I think, in Canada somewhere. I'll try and get the blog up so people can see what it looks like. And she, as you'll see, she's been running this blog for years. So let me just share the screen here. Because I think the stuff that I've got has mainly come from this blog, as I said to you in the message the other day. So you can see here, if you go back, she's got posts going back to 2009 there. So that's like, 11, 12 years ago now. And I also, somebody sent me her book, which was published, I think, a couple of years ago, which actually, to be honest, I don't mean to be rude, but it's a bit. In fact, you can see that Sergeant Pepper thing there at the top. She's got on the blog, which I don't think is a great choice of evidence, which I'll come to in a minute. So people talk about the songs and the backmasking and the backward messages and the messages in the Sergeant Pepper's cover, but really, what I came across was the thing which is here. And this is on the Digilander blog. It's some Italian guy. I don't know his real name, actually. And this was really what did it for me, because this is physical evidence. This is forensic evidence, in fact. And indeed, the other thing which really sort of said, well, there's something really to be investigated here and should be considered seriously, was this, I think it's, I don't know if I've got it in here, not to scroll the screen too much, but it was probably back in this 2009. There was a forensic study done by two forensic specialists in Italy. I don't know if it's in this post here. But what they did was they were tasked with doing a forensic analysis because they thought, oh, this Paul McCartney thing, this is a load of baloney.
Yeah.
So we're going to do a forensic investigation. And this was actually published in the Italian version of Wired magazine. And you can find this PDF of this. It's all in Italian. I haven't There is a Google translated English version, and I think Tina's got a link to it on her blog. I think I've got the PDF on my website somewhere. But anyway, so these two people set out to debunk the Paul is dead idea, and they turned out that the evidence supports that he was replaced. There are two different people, and I think the clearest indication of this is shown with these two images, or selection of images. We've got the With the Beatles cover album, and Yesterday, which is 1963 and 1966. And what the person has basically done is done the face-on shot of McCartney. I'll try and see if this will enlarge up so you can see it a bit more clearly.
Oh, we had it.
Yeah, it'll go down. It's just the scrolling, which is a bit awkward. And so what they do is they equalize the distance between the eyes and then I think the mouth, as you know, the eyes and the mouth. So that's all the same. So as long as the images that you got them face on, you can see that this is the same person. The nose matches up, the eyes match up, and the mouth matches up, and the chin matches up perfectly. And the same with this one. We've got the Sgt. Pepper album, and then an image from some of the Spies Like Us, which is that film that Paul McCartney was in like 1982 or something. I forget when it was. I think that was the film with Dan Aykroyd, I think, that he did. And that's one of the publicity shots from that film and from Sgt. Pepper's. And you can see again, perfectly matched. There's no change in the distance and the shape of the chin and whatnot. That matches perfectly. But if you take one of those images from the left GIF and one of these from the right and do the same thing, that's what you get.
Yeah, a longer face almost.
So it's a longer face. The distance to the eyes, and I actually made a little video of this, so I just cut out the eye bit, masked off the rest. So I've made a little, because somebody was arguing about this. So those eyes are the same size, but in proportion to the rest of the face is different. So that for me did it.
That's also that cover there is from the cover where they had the dismembered babies, was it?
That's it. That's the one. But yeah, the butcher's cover.
That's it. Yeah.
So you can reproduce this for yourself. You can get those images. In fact, I think I sourced these in that YouTube video that I made a few years ago because somebody was on about this. Somebody saying, "Oh, this is all rubbish, Andrew. You should take it off your website." And I'm saying, "No, this is not rubbish. This is not rubbish at all. You need to look into this."
And I know there's a moustache there, but I feel like the gap between the top lip and the nose is much bigger.
Right. So you can make these measurements, right? You can make these measurements yourself, and so really that's what I put on my article, which I did, and it was a sort of quick and dirty article. But if you go to this Digilander blog, which is still there, there's a lot more. So basically, like he's done the same thing with Lennon, and you can see the Lennon image. Let's wait for it to finish scrolling itself. The Lennon images match up perfectly with the nose and the mouth. I mean, there's a few tiny sort of pixel variations, but you can see it's the same guy. Same with Jane Asher as well. She matches up perfectly with the eyes and the nose.
And those images, it's the nose I look at.
Yeah, those images are like probably 30 years apart, nearly, I would say. So it does. In other words, as you know, the bone structure of a skull stays the same.
Mm-hmm.
Your fat levels can change, and your bags will get and your eyes get bigger and stuff, and you get a double chin or whatever, or maybe you have a double chin and then it goes away. Depending on what happens to you.
I hope so.
Yeah, depending on what happens to your weight. And so he goes into that, and then he goes into that's the one that he does that. So I pinched all these images off this blog. Let's see, I'll go through some of these because the other thing that he shows, I won't go into that one because I'll let you go explore that for yourself. Yeah, so this is the key one that I stole off and put it on my article. So that's where he goes to both. But then if you go through, the other quite interesting one is the detached earlobes, because this is where you have the style of your ears, how they grow. You have them attached to your skull, kind of the earlobes, or you can have a little gap in them.
Yeah.
And the replacement Paul has a little gap in his earlobe between the side of his head and his earlobes. So that's another key one. Again, you can study these pictures in detail yourself. That you can see the ears are different. I mean, it's fairly clear in that shot.
It's the nose there as well. I don't know if it's
Yeah,
just the angle, but
yeah,
the
yeah,
nose on the
yeah.
right seems to go in at the top, whereas the nose on the left is very straight all the way down.
Right,
I don't know if
exactly.
that's just the angle, but
Well, again, that's where you've got to study these for yourself closely to sort of decide whether you agree with this. And that's what I did, and I agree that this is not the same guy at the end of the day. Now then, the other sort of implicit assumption is that if it's not the same guy, then the original Paul is dead. And indeed, that's what this conspiracy is called, PID, Paul is dead. But there's another guy who's done a lot of research, and I recommend that interested people check him out. And he's called Mike Williams, and he has a YouTube channel, well, I think he's still got it, called Sage of Quay. He says, well, Sage of Quay actually, and I thought it was Key, but it's Quay, Qay. So he's got this moniker of Sage of Quay, and he's gone into this a bit more as well, and I recommend you check his YouTube channel out. And what he suggests, why I mentioned him, is he suggests that actually Paul wasn't necessarily killed, and they just put in a replacement. And what they were doing was, sometimes you were seeing the quote-unquote real Paul, JPM as he's called by the people who study this, and at other times you were seeing his replacement, and there was some overlap between the two, and that possibly might explain some of the anomalies whereby the post-66 pictures seem to show the same as the pre-66, yet a lot of them are different. So it seems that there was this replacement, but he was kind of came into the frame in sort of August 66, something like that.
Who is this guy, Andrew? So there's the famous thing is it's Billy Shears. William
Right.
Shears is the guy who did replace Paul McCartney. Of course, Billy Shears is mentioned in a song. I don't really like the Beatles, so I don't really know many of their songs.
This is the other thing, and it's interesting you say that you don't like the Beatles. Well, like, this is the thing. Some people are obviously mad about the Beatles, and I really like the Beatles. My brother, who's 7 years older than me, he had all the records, and I taped them and stuff when I was a kid, and so became very, very fond of the Beatles as well, like most others are. And that's one of the things that, like my brother, he just thought this was total. He wouldn't even look at it. He couldn't look at it because he had so much invested in the Beatles. Yeah. But if you don't like them very much, then you're probably more open to studying this, and thinking about it. And he wasn't. Yeah. He just wouldn't have it. So really, that is the basis of it. And I'll tell you another little story related to this. Is when I went to a conference, and there's another chap that some people in the group might be familiar with, who was speaking there at this conference. This was in 2013, was it? I think it was 2013, round about then, round about then. And he did a general conspiracy talk about lots of different conspiracies. Andy Thomas is his name.
Yes, yeah.
He's done about crop circles. And he mentioned the Paul is dead conspiracy in his talk. But what he did in his talk, which kind of puzzled me really, was he just talked about the backmasking in the songs, the song lyrics, the messages in the songs, the Sgt. Pepper's cover. And he didn't mention any of this, what I've shown you. None of it. Not one bit of it. And I thought, well, that's quite peculiar, because by then I already knew about this. Yeah. And so I spoke to him afterwards, not when he was doing his talk. I didn't want to heckle him or anything. But we actually had a little, the hosts of the event, because this was in Edinburgh, this talk, they kindly took us to Rosslyn Chapel, which is about like half an hour's drive out of Edinburgh, something like that, 40 minutes maybe. They kindly took us there. I'd never been, and it's an interesting place. So I got a little chance to chat to Andy Thomas privately. I met him a couple of times, so we already knew each other, at least, as people sort of thing, acquainted rather than friends or anything. And then I brought this up to him privately. I wasn't like having a go at him or anything. So I sort of said, well, what do you think of the sort of facial comparisons and the distance between the eyes and things like that? He wouldn't talk about it.
Really?
Didn't want to know. Yeah, didn't want to know. Didn't want to
Ah,
know.
that's
Um,
interesting. I think for me that this is the kind of the nuts and bolts of the proof.
yeah,
The other stuff that you've mentioned, and we can go into what some of that stuff is. Um, a lot of people say that yeah, it became a rumor. The Beatles obviously heard about the rumor. Did they play on it? Did they use it to kind of just fuel? Did they have a bit of a laugh with it, and just keep it going for a while, just to see how far they could take it and how gullible some of the people would be? Maybe I've even heard that it was actually a psyop, um, by some powers that be, just to see how easy it would be to get people to follow these kind of conspiracies, to fall into really easy traps, no matter how silly the evidence actually was. So, some of the things that they actually did, the Beatles themselves, as you've already alluded to, is these hints on the Sergeant Pepper's cover with the hand over Paul's head, which was a Tibetan sign of death. We have the very famous Abbey Road front cover, where they're crossing the road, and Paul McCartney is barefooted, the only one that is barefooted, which of course is a sign again of death. We also have keep that there, Andrew, because I want to come back to that. We also have records that were played backwards, which with John Lennon saying, "I buried Paul, I miss him, I miss him, I miss him." All this kind of stuff. I think there's also one where they've all got white roses or red roses, and Paul McCartney's rose in his pocket is actually black, which again is a symbol of a funeral or a death again. So were they playing on it? I think they were a little bit. Now this is interesting because I'd actually heard this, that they were at one point the same height or something. I might get this the wrong way around, but the new Paul was actually taller than John, and there was a time where they would always stand and share a microphone, as they are there on the top left. But then they stopped touring for a little while, I believe, and then when they did appear again, they were never seen singing together ever again, and they think it was to hide the new height difference that people would recognise. Is that right?
yeah, something like that, Kieran, was my understanding too. That there was this increase in height by about 2 inches. Now, of course, these pictures here are not particularly clear, but if you study this, and I think the other one that Digilanda does, I think this, if it's lower down this page, yeah, you can see it on the Sergeant Pepper's cover. But again, they one of them could have been standing on a box or something to kind of get the composure of the picture
Yeah.
how they wanted or something like that. There's always that possibility for something like that. But it does seem, if you look at the evidence, that the new Paul was indeed about 2 inches taller, and there's because he also does a height comparison with
Yes, I've
Jane
seen that.
Asher, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there it is. But again, they could on this particular one, for example, they could be walking on uneven ground or something. So there
He
could
could
be,
have heels on. He could have
yeah,
like
or she could
Chelsea
have heels
boots.
on them, one of
Yeah.
them or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, it's not conclusive, but it is somewhat suspicious. And also, if you investigate the timing and the sort of rumours around the Jane Asher Paul McCartney split. There are some interesting sort of facts about that come out. Well, maybe not facts, but testimonies and accounts from people who knew them. They've said that there was some apparent unusual goings on. Now, I can't remember the details of these off the top of my head, but they're worth studying. So that's one that you can look at. What was I going to say earlier about the motivation thing? Yeah, going back to the motivation thing, and you were saying about the Beatles being, a big phenomenon and stuff, and were they milking it? Were they just sort of deciding that it was how, what they could convince people of as some kind of, sort of inside joke or something, or prank. But if you read John Coleman's book, the Committee of 300, which is actually very interestingly posted on the CIA's website, and if anybody wants me to send them the link for the John Coleman book being on the CIA's website, I will send them it. Somebody sent me it a few weeks ago. But in that book, Coleman claims that the Beatles were a social experiment of the Tavistock Institute, and the problem with that claim is he doesn't cite any evidence for that, and it's the same with that whole book, that he's essentially telling you what he knows, but he doesn't quote his sources. Presumably, it's all inside information. That he did work for intelligence in some capacity, and he states that he describes that in the beginning. So he's claiming that he has inside information, but he doesn't really give you any more than that. But going back to Mike Williams again, he investigated that sort of idea of the Beatles being a social engineering experiment and what other, ancillary evidence there might be. And he made a video about that fairly recently, actually, within the last couple of years. And it's a very interesting video because he, for example, looks at the timeline of how the Beatles actually produced. I think it was at the Rubber Soul album. I think it was it was either Rubber Soul or Revolver, and he literally he spends about 2 hours going through the whole timeline of the development of one of those two albums. Let's just say it was Revolver, but it might be Rubber Soul. He looks at each song. He looks at what they were doing, like, because they were touring and stuff, and then they were doing other things, TV appearances. I think they spent some time in America, and then they came back, and I think maybe they did a few bits in Europe or something. And he goes through that whole timeline, and he said they would not have had time to write these songs, rehearse them, spend the studio time to get them as good as they were. And he quotes from Ringo Starr saying, that he's got this quote from an interview by Ringo Starr, and Ringo Starr talks about the writers, as in the writers of that were doing either Revolver or Soul. So Ringo Starr mentions that other people were involved with the Rubber Soul album, and this is where Mike Williams sort of tries to find evidence that they were being managed from and given stuff from outside,
which happens all the time. The thing is, now that's normal, isn't it, Andrew?
Right.
More from my childhood, there was quite a heavy-ish band called Linkin Park.
Yep.
Who, they gave this story about how they kind of grew up together. They were always in this band, blah blah blah. And then you find out, well, actually, no, they're manufactured, and none of them knew each other before they were put together, and this whole backstory was an illusion. And they were essentially just a boy band. In fact, they never swore in their songs. This is kind of like metal, and they don't swear in their songs. And everyone was, that's a bit weird. And it's because they were just a boy band, really aimed at the young teen market. And I think even back around the Beatles time, the Monkees are now famous for not even playing their own instruments. Was
that's
it or
right.
something like that?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. They're a manufactured group. Yeah.
So there's no. That's not a conspiracy in itself.
No.
And once they realised how much money the Beatles were making, which, Christ, it's it's ridiculous, really. It's, why wouldn't you want to keep that alive? I've just been having a quick Google search there, and of course, the famous manager of the Beatles, was it Epstein? He was basically held lookalike competitions for each of his Beatles in case one of them should die or become incapacitated. Such was their value to him and the label and everybody who had their hands in the Beatles' pie, so to speak. So they just couldn't afford to let somebody die, particularly so early on in their career. They had to keep going to make their money, really. So when people say, well, why, it's all a bit silly, it's not really, and obviously Billy Shears, I can't remember his full name. It's William something Shears, is it?
I can't remember his full name either.
He William Campbell Shears.
Well, that's it.
Says here, entered and won a Beatle lookalike competition organised by Brian Epstein, who was looking for Beatle doubles in case one of his boys got killed. So Billy Shears was the winner. So is it likely? Very. And when you look at some of the things that you're putting up, Andrew, here, that's a no-brainer to me. When you look at the height difference, when you look at the ears, when you look at the whole head shape, really, like the new Paul is very, It's a longer head, in my
You know,
opinion.
and if you look at what Tina Foster put together, she argues that the Paul replacement, he had plastic surgery, you know, and there was some, and it was during, if you look at some of the videos and images from the Magical Mystery Tour, there's some strange images of Paul where he looks like, and it does look like he might have had plastic surgery on his nose or his chin
Well, there's the
and this sort of
famous
thing.
scar, isn't there, that people talk about, where there's a scar that's just above McCartney's top lip, which he apparently got when he fell off his moped, and it was so bad that he chipped some of his teeth,
That's it.
and
That's it.
as a
There's that
result,
famous picture. Yeah.
he grew a moustache to hide that scar.
That's it.
But
That's it. So she brings in some of that account as well, and other people have as well.
yeah,
So you know, things start to stack up a bit more, and you know, he has to be taken seriously. I think, even when you don't quite know, you know, the final conclusion. I wouldn't, you know, I'm not like 100% that Paul was replaced. I'm probably say I'm over 90%, but
right.
I'm not 100%. But you know, it's the thing with like the shape of the skull is it should lift me to 100%, but I'm still holding back slightly because you know, it may be that there was this double that was circulating and he wasn't actually killed, and maybe that's all what my reservations are related to subconsciously. And I, you know, as I say, I'm a big fan of the Beatles, so maybe that's sort of stopping me letting go completely as I have with
Yeah.
some of the other stuff. You know, I don't know. Now I'd just like to mention that this eye color one is interesting, and I thought this was also a good really good comparison to look at. However, there's an interesting video that was published quite recently by a chap called Brian that got in touch with me, and he got some really good clear pictures of McCartney. And the eye colour thing, when you look at it, is a bit more equivocal, because I think Paul had hazel eyes, and these eyes can actually have quite a range of colours depending on the lighting. More, you know, a bigger range than say like my eyes are darkish brown. They tend to appear brown or dark, you know, in all lighting conditions. Whereas with hazel eyes, they can actually appear different colours in different lighting, a bit, or you know, not massive range, but enough of a range to make your images like this equivocal. In other words, there's some doubt there. So the eye colour one is perhaps not a slam dunk one that I originally thought it was. There is another video by this Brian guy. I haven't got all these to hand, and he shows about that there's freckles on the face, and these seem to match as well between the pre-66 Paul and the post-66 Paul. Now, of course, they could have added those with cosmetic surgery, freckles and things. So that again doesn't prove it. Things like bone structure, though, and distance between the eyes, again, very, very difficult to alter that without breaking bones.
Well,
or
people think that the scar and the moustache and the damaged teeth was actually an attempt by Billy Shears to have some kind of surgery in order to look a little bit more like Paul.
Right.
But as you say, what you can't do is change the structure of your skull almost.
Yeah. Not to any significant degree, really. That's you would
No. And
hide this.
what I find interesting is he actually, in my opinion, he you know, he's still going now. Obviously, George died. John Lennon obviously died or was killed. Ringo isn't really active in terms of being musical now. Although, as a drummer myself, I might argue he never really was. But the Paul McCartney seems to be the longest lasting. You know, he seems to have been in the limelight the most. He's still going now.
Yeah.
They wheel him out every now and then. He's telling you now to go and get your jab and all that stuff. Is that anything to do with what might happen?
I think it is, and I mean, if I go, I'll try and go back to my original article if I can find that. Let's just see. Yeah, and again, he's become a big hobnobber. I mean, there you see the picture that's come up there.
Yeah,
look who he stood next to, for heaven's sake.
Yeah.
You know. And same with Elvis Costello. He did this concert in the White House, and then there was another one which really was a red flag for me. I'll try and open this news story here. Look. And Paul McCartney makes Bethlehem visit, and he's done a concert in Israel. So what's this Israel connection all about? You know, why is that a thing? You know, let's see what was the other one was as well. Oh, this is a good one. I'll play this clip because it's only about 2 minutes long. I think this is. Some people say, "Oh, yeah, it's just kind of this doesn't really mean anything," and perhaps they're right. But I'll just try and see if we can play this. You might not get the sound though, so can I send the sound? I think I can. Just hang on. Let me just go back to that thing there, and then we should be able to hear the sound. I'll stop there. I might have to restart the screen share.
Okay, yeah, sure.
And let's see if I can share the
Just
sound
while you're
as well.
doing that, I just want to bring this up by so this is from Paul Northridge of Unite Planet. So Andrew does shows with Unite Planet. Anyone that isn't aware of Unite Planet, please give them a follow. Very good guys, do some good shows. There's a clip where the Beatles were in a kitchen and they're calling Paul Billy. Now, Paul, if you can find me that clip, can you send us a link or something in the comments, and maybe we can play
try
that.
And include it.
Just to see that.
I think it's actually, if it is, it might just be George. I think George is there. Maybe it's Ringo as well, and Paul comes in, and they do call him Billy. And we'll go back to this Billy thing a little bit in a little bit, perhaps, just to explore that a bit more. But I'll just share my screen again. I'll try and play them. We should get the sound coming through now with any luck.
Okay, let me just get it on. There we go.
And this is from 1980.
This is John Lawrence in London. Another of John Lennon's former partners, Paul McCartney, spent the day at an Oxford Street studio saying, "Work is the best tonic." Police were standing by along with reporters as McCartney finished.
What was your reaction to the death of John Lennon?
I was very shocked, It's terrible news.
What were you recording today?
I was just listening to some stuff, I just didn't want to sit at home.
Why?
Well, I didn't feel like it.
What time did you hear the news?
This morning sometime.
Very early?
Yeah. Gone now, yeah? Drag, isn't it? Okay, cheers.
Hello, guys.
The survivor of the most successful songwriting team in history also said, John will be remembered for his unique contribution to art, music, and world peace.
So that's McCartney reacting to his writing partner's death. And how do you assess that? I mean,
well, for me, the standout comment there was, "It's a drag in it."
Yeah, exactly. That's what stuck it. As the first time I saw that, I couldn't believe that when I saw it. I thought, no way. And the other things that went through my mind when I saw that is he on drugs? Is he kind of?
He looks very.
Off his head?
Yeah, he can't keep focus. He's whether he's just desperate to get away. I don't know, but it looks like he's on edge.
Yeah, but he's coherent. But that does not seem like an appropriate reaction. And there's also, you can find the clip. I haven't got it here, but there's a clip where he reacts to the death of George Harrison as well. Obviously, I think it was 2002 or 3 or something when George Harrison had died. That's more kind of what you'd expect. Let's see. And then there's this other story which I came across where Paul McCartney was, here he is, he's all dressed in black. Oh, no, it's been taken off now. It's been moved. Let's see if I can go back to the other version of that. Oh, yeah, Paul McCartney, The Queen is Fabulous. And, of course, John Lennon sent his MBE back, didn't he?
Yes.
The Queen is Fabulous. I've got a lot of time for her. So, in other words, these are just all examples of him being very establishment, very, following the programme. Let's see, Paul McCartney closing the open ceremony. There's another one where he talks about climate change as well and what a threat it is. And he closed the London 2012 Olympics. Again, we've probably done things about that, and if we haven't, maybe we should, because there's things about the Olympic ceremony.
Oh, I think we spoke about that with regards to COVID and some of the predictions that it gave there. And of course, I just want to shout out here to the great research that the late Rick Clay did around the Olympic ceremony. That's RIK and then just Clay. If you find him on YouTube, he supposedly killed himself, but he obviously didn't. But yeah.
The other things which I don't think we'll play, these would probably take a bit too much time, but you can watch them they're still on YouTube. this whole thing with Heather Mills, I mean, that was totally weird.
Yeah.
Now, just the way they met and stuff and her whole history. But I didn't know until seeing this clip what she said when they split up. And she talked in sort of very guarded terms. And she came onto this broadcast to try and clear her name because she'd been absolutely crucified by the media, way beyond what you'd expect even for somebody in her position. And she actually clears the air a bit. So I'm not going to play it here, but you should go and watch this and see what you make of it in the context of this sort of possibility that Paul was replaced. Either he was killed and replaced, or he had a double that was, assumed.
So does she talk about almost like she doesn't talk about that? As in,
what she says is she basically says that if Paul McCartney's people try to go after me, then I've taken steps to secure my safety. And she says the word that she says in this interview, I can't remember if it's in part 1, 2, or 3. She says, I've got a box of evidence which is going to be opened, and shown at the appropriate time if, X happens to me. So she talks about having a box of evidence about McCartney. Now, she doesn't say it proves he was replaced or anything like that.
Could be anything. It
could be anything.
Yeah.
It could be anything. But if you listen to the interview, you have to make your own mind up whether it's relevant or not to the Paul is dead. I forget her exact words now, but it's definitely worth watching in that context. Now, it may just be that she had obviously come to conclude that Paul was part of this, group, the club, whatever you want to call it. Paul maybe is not what you'd call a global elite, but he's probably a global elite in the music industry, isn't he?
Yeah.
He's one of, and then there's that whole thing with Michael Jackson, isn't there? I mean, I haven't explored that very much, but the whole thing where Michael Jackson bought all his songs, and then of course Michael Jackson died, didn't he? And
yeah, well, the rights of his music were taken off him by Sony, weren't they? I think.
Right. I mean, again, I don't know the whole story, but this is where you can start to explore the motives a bit more and those sorts of areas if you look into that, which, frankly, I haven't. I've mainly focused on some of the physical evidence.
The music industry is something I've kind of played with a little bit. Obviously, never got to the heights of some of these people, but I've been around some of these executives and some of these record label type people, and you always get the feeling that you are just a product to them, and you're disposable at any point. And in fact, I've got a very close friend, and I won't say too much because I can't. But he's experienced this on a very, very deep, dark level. To basically, you do what we tell you, you say what we tell you, you push any agenda we tell you to push. So when you see these kind of these music videos with people scantily clad and promoting a gay agenda or a trans agenda or whatever, people like Justin Bieber, Britney Spears, all these people that end up having mental breakdowns, in their 30s and their 40s because of Miley Cyrus, because of how they were treated as young stars. They're just money spinners for these corporations. Which comes back to the motive as why couldn't they just say, look, Paul McCartney's dead and that's the end of the Beatles, or here's a replacement and we're going to carry on. They just couldn't, could they? Because there was so much invested in it at the time.
No, that's it. And I think perhaps one of the reasons for trying to keep this hidden is, and Tina Foster explores this a little bit in one of her other books, is this idea of prominent public figures having doubles. Because we've seen that in several places, like fairly recently with Hillary Clinton, for example.
Yes.
Apparently she does have a double, and I think there's quite a few people have I think to some degree, have been able to prove that these are two different people, particularly in her last election campaign in 2016. I think there were a few instances where people said, no, that's not Hillary, and of course, Saddam Hussein was said to have, I think, 5 or 6 doubles that he used. And
it went back to Hitler, didn't it? I think even people like Hitler had doubles just in case they ever I mean, Hitler being dead or not is probably a completely different show.
Sure.
But yeah, these people have always had doubles because it just makes sense.
So in other words, if you get so much evidence in the public domain that somebody like Paul McCartney did indeed have a double, whether that was because he died or whether they just replaced him and the original one was still living just for another reason, and they got away with it, then that's a bit like proving that 9/11 wasn't the official story. 9/11 wasn't true. It's the same sort of thing, and they've got one less tool in their arsenal which they use to deceive people. Because that's at the base level what this is about, and this is why I'm interested in it. It's a global deception. It's a global deception that millions of people have been taken in by. That's why what interests me about it.
Well,
And
I
all the
mentioned
other
when
stuff I
you
research.
when you had to just nip off there at the start, I mentioned that some people have told you, take it from your site, it discredits all the other work you do, and I was saying that I think that's really unfair because someone like myself, well, I look at the evidence and sometimes it's a bit of fun. We did a show on the Mandela effect and stuff like that.
Right.
Sometimes it's a bit of fun, but sometimes the evidence is the evidence and facts is facts. And if it's taking you down a particular route, then you have to go with that. And just because it isn't such a world changing event such as 9/11 or COVID or something like that, the conspiracy surrounding the moon landings and stuff like that, because it is just a bloke from Liverpool who happens to be in a really big band, people go, oh, it doesn't really matter, does it? But no, but if they've managed to pull this off, which the evidence, in my opinion, suggests they have, then that's massive. It doesn't take two towers falling down and for thousands of people dying and stuff. It's as you said, it's a deception. It's fantastical how they've pulled it off, and it's phenomenal that kind of thing can even happen, and it deserves the attention that we're giving.
You remember the quote that John Lennon said that got him into a lot of trouble, that the Beatles were bigger than Jesus, or words to that effect. I can't remember if that was the exact quote, but it was something very close to that one.
Was it bigger than Christ?
Yeah, it might have been, but you know what I mean. And then they had all those Beatles records burnings, public burnings in the US, didn't they? So why I'm bringing that up is that the Beatles were the biggest phenomenon. There were more people knew about the Beatles than just about anything else, at the time. In that, and so even more people know about Paul McCartney than 9/11. Going across the whole world, they will have known who he was. So, like you say, it's a massive thing. The other bit of interesting thing that came out of Tina Foster's research when I spoke to her, because on this page you'll also find an interview I did with her, because I was so intrigued by this. I wanted to get the words from the horse's mouth, so to speak. So that audio there on that page is the interview I did with Tina in 2012. It's about an hour long, I think. So that and one of the things that we discussed in that is that there was the Beatles were in Hamburg, don't you? They did some of their early concerts in Hamburg. That's where they did a lot of their kind of develop their skills as musicians, at least live musicians. They were there for like 9 months or a year or something. And of course, they were going out with girls. And there was one woman there who claimed that she had an affair with Paul McCartney. And I think whenever it was, 1990s sometime, I think it was. Might have even been later than that. She came out publicly and said that her daughter's father was Paul McCartney, and she actually set up a court case because she wanted to sue Paul McCartney for alimony. Was it? I don't know, but it was you can find this court case, and apparently Paul McCartney did have to send a signed document, but when they had the handwriting analysed. This was signed by somebody who writes with their right hand.
Paul was a lefty.
Paul was left-handed, and the left-handed, right-handed issue has come up a few times as well, where people have claimed. Again, I think it's in some of Tina's posts that Paul was caught playing the bass right-handed.
Caught smoking with his right hand as well.
That's it. There's another one. And again, that in of itself is not conclusive because I'm right-handed, but I do use my left hand for some things.
But it's awkward, isn't it, Andrew? I think the last show I mentioned crisps. I'm gonna want to get people to think I've got a complex, but I eat crisps a certain way, and it all. Sometimes you do eat it the other way, and it feels weird. You do it; it feels weird, so you don't really do it. And I don't smoke, but I can. If ever I'm in the office and I'm holding a pen or I'm just walking around holding something, it's always in my given hand. So to smoke with your left hand, I imagine, is quite awkward. So as you say, it's quite trivial, but is it a giveaway sign?
Right, exactly. So you start stacking these things up, and the other one that Tina had brought to my attention when I originally spoke to her was that the Beatles had a roadie called Mal Evans, and he had sort of come out I think again in the 90s sometime, and said he was going to publish this tell-all book about his time with the Beatles, and then he died. I don't think the book even came out. So. Yeah, maybe he just had a heart attack and died. It might just be natural causes. But again, there were some suspicious circumstances around that. And if he was a roadie, then yeah, he probably did get some inside knowledge of the goings on within the group. And maybe he overheard some conversations. Again, it's all maybes and hearsay, but again, it's another little data point that I think is worth looking into.
Yeah, I think just want to bring up some comments here. So I think this was Paul again. Have you seen the Paul McCartney and Beck new song? Editing is awesome. As Paul is so in the video, I'm assuming this is Paul. They've edited it to make it look like he's back in the 60s, and at the end he takes a mask off to reveal Beck. That's fine, he's collaborating with Beck.
Yeah.
But is that a hint? As if to say this isn't me.
Yeah.
In the 60s, like I changed and a very interesting point there.
I mean, again, you listen to some of the song lyrics, particularly "I'm looking through you." That's a really interesting one. If you listen to the lyrics of that, "I'm looking through you," where did you go? I thought I knew you. What did I know? You don't look different, but you're not the same.
Yeah. It could be argued it's about a woman. It's a relationship.
Exactly.
But is it?
Is it?
Yeah.
And
it's the reversals. It's the reversals for me. We have the one where he supposedly says cranberry sauce. John Lennon says cranberry sauce or something in Strawberry Fields Forever. But some people actually think they hear I buried Paul. Which is interesting. In fact, John Lennon got quite annoyed with this. He compared it to his "We're bigger than Christ" comment and said, like, look, this is really beginning to get annoying now. He said, I don't listen to my songs backwards. I listen to them forwards. And so no, I don't know what you're talking about. Is he just playing hardball? But again, it comes back to if he didn't actually die and these rumors were started, by whoever back in the 60s, which is maybe something to look into. How did they actually start? Where did these originate from? Was it just another arm of money spinning for them, and just gaining their popularity, but a different avenue? All news is good. All publicity is good publicity, as they say. And could they have just done it themselves and played on it and known that these little things they were putting on album covers and little lyrics, as you say, knowing that it would just fuel that fire and just laughing at it, really?
Yeah, well, what we can do is, if you want, we can try and play this clip that Paul has sent through. I'll bring that across to my other
if you've
screen.
got it, I'm glad you've got that, because I was trying to copy that.
Yeah, I've got it there. So let's just have a look. I think I've seen this before. It's only a minute long, so we can play this.
Yeah.
I think we've got plenty of time. So I'll set this going, unmute it.
It's kind of like when I met Paul McCartney. I'd never even been on Saturday Night Live. He was hanging out at Lorne Michaels' house, and I had the presence of mind at that moment not to go, who wrote A Hard Day's Night, So I said, I talked about his album 1980 and the song Tug of War, and I said, that lyric in the chorus, one day we'll stand up on top of the mountain with our flag unfurled, but it won't be soon enough. And he just lit up. He just lit up. Oh, that was a song. You know, I thought I just pictured a big flag, you know, up on the top of a mountain, you know. And then that was it. That was it. We were fast friends after that. So I think with Billy, people like it if you take one of his obscure songs or obscure album and be very specific about a lyric that he wrote. People love that. You know, it'd be the same thing with Slayton. If you brought up some obscure bit from 20 years ago. Yeah, you like that, huh? That was good. It's all right. Yeah. All right. What's it like to be Bobby all day long? Well, mostly he's just quiet in a room. He has to rest those pipes. And, hey.
I haven't seen that clip before. I mean, he possibly could be referring to somebody other than Paul in that one, but the one I'd seen was where I think Paul comes into the room and George Harrison calls him Billy or Bill.
No,
I think it's more commonly Billy.
Paul has said that it's hard to find that, as YouTube have deleted a lot of Paul is dead videos, which is interesting in itself. Why? You know, if it was a harmless fun, then why they delete? Now this is interesting. So this has been put up by Johnny, who's the other half of Unite Planet. So he's mentioned here that I'm not going to read it all out. In fact, I don't think you can see it all. But the gist of what Johnny's saying here is that in a lot of interviews and documentaries, Paul seems to almost word for word describe the same stories over and over again from the earlier parts of his life, which would have been pre this Paul being Paul almost. Almost like he was given a script back in the day to learn about these memories, and he describes them almost word for word every time he tells them, because that's all he knows, because he never actually experienced those memories. You know, I tell the same stories and I embellish them, depending on who I'm talking to, and they change a little bit, but they're never word for words. So maybe there's something in that. It's a very interesting point there, by Johnny. We've got about 3 minutes left or so. Obviously, thank you for everyone joining in. It's been a very interactive show. We've had a lot of viewers coming and going. Andrew, I'd like to stick with the music theme, actually. I don't know if you've ever heard of Morrissey from the Smiths predicting Princess Diana's death.
I didn't know that. No, I heard of Morrissey, but not that. No, I hadn't.
No, so I think we should do a show on that. Anyone watching, if you'd like to see that, let me know. We can talk about this off air. Obviously, we've only got a couple of minutes left, but I feel like that will give you something to get your teeth into over the next couple of weeks. I think you'll enjoy looking into that. But the basis of it is, that he wrote songs and lyrics and pictures that have predicted Diana's death. And in fact, he was asked on a chat show after she died, "What did you make of Diana's death?" And his reply was, "Well, it was so predictable," which is a very interesting reply. But yeah, have you got any kind of closing comments on the Paul is dead theory?
Well, really, I suppose just to reiterate a couple of things. You can look at Tina Foster's blog, which I brought up at the beginning, and look at some of the Mike Williams stuff. Mike Williams has got a very good presentation style. Very orderly, very well thought out. You know, starts with a nice introduction, ends with a summary and conclusion. I think he must have some experience in either business presentations or tuition or something. Look at some of his videos. He's got sort of more background stuff as well. He goes a lot into Paul's replacement being Billy Shepherd, or possibly, and then he brings in Viv Stanshall as well. Some people might be familiar with Viv Stanshall. That's kind of weird, but he backs it up with evidence. He's pretty much evidence-based for the most part, for the vast majority of it. So, look into that. And again, just keep your mind open and explore the evidence and see where you get to with it. You know, because we're not going to get any public admissions of this, really. Not a thing, you know, you're just not, you know. So.
No, which you know, like I say, it's quite light-hearted. I said this at the start, you know, it gives us a break from talking about things such as COVID and stuff like that, which we all need. But you know, as you've seen there, it is quite sinister, you know, for someone to die and to just kind of cold-heartedly almost replace him and just move on. You know, whatever, he's gone. Let's replace him with the next one. There's something sinister there, really, and you have to wonder how often has this happened at this level, you know. Does it happen with other people, as you mentioned? people have their lookalikes and stuff, and the people we see on TV, is it really Hillary Clinton now, or is it really whoever it is that we see? And as technology progresses and we have CGI and things like Project Bluebeam coming more and more into the foreground now, it's looking more and more likely that that's possible. To be honest, but thank you as ever, Andrew, for coming on, for giving up your time.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you to everyone for watching and for commenting and interacting. It's been great, and fingers crossed, all being well, we'll see you in a couple of weeks, and we will do that show, I think, on Morrissey and Princess Diana as well, which should be an interesting show. So thank you very much. Look after yourselves, everybody, and see you soon.